All right, so we're really lucky to have Kelly Collins and Anthony Medeiros here with us from Brown from the University of Minnesota. One of our themes as we're sort of grounding the building and hope for America's Next 250 is really about how do we scale dialogue institutionally as a way to navigate this unprecedented uncertainty that we're experiencing, as well as responding to the real reality of crisis that emerge, which both of these folks have had to navigate over the past year. We've asked them to speak because their work does all of those things, right? The long term, the institutional, the immediate crisis, and really is such tangible and beautiful ways of showing us what's possible. So we're really, really, really grateful to have both of you here with us. So they're going to be sharing each of their own sort of journeys about how they've gotten here institutionally, what they've been learning and trying, where it's going, all of that good stuff. They're each going to have about 15 minutes. All right, for introductions, and then I'm going to hand it over. We have Dr. Kelly Collins, who is the director of the Inclusive Dialogue and Civic Engagement Program at the University of Minnesota. She holds a doctorate in organizational leadership and policy development from UMN and a master's in higher ed and student affairs from the University of Iowa. Her career spans first gen and low income student advising, racial and social justice education, and Native American student success roles at both the UMN and the Metropolitan State University. She currently serves on the steering committees for the First Gen Institute and the Indigenous Women and Women of Color Affinity Group, identifies as a First Gen alumna, a community activist, an intergenerational caregiver, a traditional bead worker, and an equity scholar practitioner. Let's give it up, Kelly. And alongside Kelly, we have Anthony Medeiros, who directs Brown University's Community Dialogue Project, where he has led the program's relaunch and expansion since joining in 2025. They're building experiential learning that develops students to facilitate leaders and collaborative problem solvers. Develop students into facilitative leaders and collaborative problem solvers. Before Brown, he spent nearly a decade as a U.S. diplomat and a USAID Foreign Service officer, most recently as the Deputy Director of Democracy, Governance, and Peace at the U.S. Embassy in Kinshasa, the DRC. His background includes peace building and human rights work across Uganda, the DRC, and Gabon, spanning youth civic leadership, interfaith dialogue, electoral observation, and post-coup constitutional reform. Let's give it up for Anthony. All right, Kelly, over to you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, les invités. Kumaha Kelly Collins. Viva. I'm Kelly Collins, greeting you in my Indigenous language, Kumaha, as a practice of sovereignty, and I'm from the Omaha Nation in Nebraska. Any Nebraskans? They're never. No, okay. And the University of Minnesota. So it's such an honor to be here with colleagues who believe, as we do, that dialogue is not simply another communication strategy. Folks ask me that a lot. It is an educational practice, a leadership practice, and increasingly an emerging aspect of our institutional culture. I've been so inspired to learn yesterday and already today about the ways that you have been cultivating this in your campuses as well. I was super inspired last night. So as you know, we are a large public research one state university. We have 5 campuses, 1 in the Twin Cities Metro and 4 across greater Minnesota, that has experienced the waves of constraints that faces most of us these days. I think everyone. Reduced state funding, enrollment challenges, and intense pressure emanating from the political climate and the current federal administration's cuts to higher ed. So with that, this practice of hope, of taking the long view, thinking about being a good ancestor in the ways that Grace opened us with today, is so critically important in these times. That's one of the ways the Indigenous epistemology frames that as being a good ancestor, thinking about that long view. So many folks at the U of M and beyond ask me, so I work in DEI. Why dialogues? Why now when everything is so precarious? And when people ask about how dialogue became a priority at the University of Minnesota, I often share that our story did not begin with a strategic plan, although it is, spoiler, now in our strategic plan. But for us, it really began with students. In the wake of the events of October 7th, 2023, our campus, like so many across higher education, experienced increased tension, grief, uncertainty, and very significant polarization. Students were asking difficult questions. They were navigating painful experiences of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and fear. They wanted places where they could connect, speak honestly, listen, and remain connected despite profound differences. Rather than asking the university administration to provide answers, many of our students asked us just to create space to connect and have better conversations. Specifically, a group of students from interfaith organizations that already had connections with each other approached the Office for Equity and Diversity seeking support to attend an Essential Partners training. And we sponsored a small group of students and staff to attend, I believe in the winter of 2023. And the funny thing is, I still don't actually know how they found out about Essential Partners. Like, it's still a mystery, but the students brought it to us and they were like, have you heard of this? And so we decided to follow their lead. That request from students changed everything. We started that spring by primarily facilitating a dialogue series with student groups. An example for our campus is we connected Minnesota Hillel, the Lutheran Campus Ministry, and the Minnesota Muslim Student Association for a series of dialogues. Since then, we've come a long way, but we are still building alongside our students, faculty, and staff. And I was really profoundly humbled to hear some of the amazing initiatives that you all are doing on your campuses. We are definitely still in the building phase, but I don't think the building will ever end. So today, our Office for Equity and Diversity partners with the Center for Educational Innovation and the Office for Conflict Resolution on our campus and Essential Partners to imagine something different, not a one-time event, but the beginning of a campus culture grounded in dialogic learning. And that's a question we get a lot from our faculty and instructors is like, oh, this is just a workshop, right? This is just an in-service. And we talk a lot about how we're actually trying to embed these in all different areas of our campuses. So we have 3 primary dialogue initiatives that are emanating from this work. We have dialogues that are embedded currently in our leadership minor curriculum that we're hoping to build out. We also run a series of dialogues for students and student leaders that are currently being hosted by our Multicultural Center for Academic Excellence. And we're hoping that other programs look at us and say, like, how can our program get a series like that? And then a growing faculty and staff fellowship for our colleagues who are hoping to learn and practice dialogue in their classrooms and on their teams. And we're hoping to follow the lead of Essential Partners, especially shout out to Grace, eventually a community practice similar to the one that we get to engage in with Essential Partners. So as I heard many of you discuss yesterday, dialogues immediately generated a lot of excitement on our campus. We love new initiatives in higher education, especially when students are the ones requesting and leading the work. But as happens, a challenge for us, student leadership is temporal by design, right? Students graduate, they're supposed to. Student senates elect new leaders. Student governing bodies and organizations have new leadership all the time. So a challenge, because our work really started with those students, all of whom now have graduated or taken on new roles, is we continue to face that challenge of continuing to grow initiatives while sustaining the existing work. And that's why the mapping that Essential Partners leads us in has been really critical for us. We started to identify key leaders across all of our campuses to join us in supporting those student leaders, but also getting more partners around the table. So last summer with my colleagues, I attended the week-long Essential Partners Facilitator Intensive. We were in St. Louis. Shout out to Teresa, who was part of that cohort. And that became a turning point for many of us. We learned a framework, but more importantly, I was reflecting with my colleagues about this. We experienced what dialogue actually feels like. We slowed down because we had just been running, right? We started to lead with curiosity instead of certainty, notice our own assumptions rather than defend them, and hopefully creating conditions where people could remain in relationship while exploring real disagreement and that polarity that we talked about for those of us that were here yesterday. That experience fundamentally shifted how I and my colleagues thought about leadership and education and how dialogue fits in. And it showed us that if we wanted dialogue to become part of the university and all of our campuses, We couldn't rely on a handful of passionate facilitators or student leaders, although we treasure those folks. We needed to build capacity across the institution. So today that work has grown into a community of more than 25 trained faculty, staff, and student facilitators representing multiple colleges and administrative units across our university, with additional colleagues who have expressed interest in joining the facilitation community. I think it was last winter that we did our first training where we started to build out that facilitator team. And what has been especially encouraging in this work is that it hasn't been isolated within one office. It started, the seeds were planted in the Office for Equity and Diversity, but we really approach dialogue as a shared institutional infrastructure. So today, our Office for Equity and Diversity works alongside, as I mentioned, the Center for Educational Innovation, our teaching and learning unit, student affairs, academic departments, libraries. Librarians are always in for this stuff. Conflict resolution, and our community partners. Dialogue is becoming something that we build together. This collaborative approach has allowed us to embed dialogue in multiple parts of university life, and I'll just offer a few examples. So we've integrated dialogic experiences into our leadership minor courses, as I mentioned, so that students don't simply learn about leadership, they practice navigating complexity together as part of their identity as a leader. And this, I'll just say, is my favorite dialogic initiative that I've gotten to be a part of. So last academic year, we piloted a series of embedded dialogues into the syllabus of this one course, this leadership minor course that has many sections. And we embedded that dialogue series into 3 sections as a pilot. Very, very important. We always start everything saying, this is a pilot, and we're going to get a lot of data, and we did. Next year, we hope to expand it to all 30 sections of this course. It's a really popular course on our campus. And by the end of the semester, where we piloted it, we had the student TAs co-leading the dialogues. They were able to attend the facilitator training and then help to lead the dialogues by the end of the semester, which was a huge leadership development experience for them. We got lots of really positive assessment from these courses as part of the regular course assessment. We did build out a new section of our assessment about the dialogue experience in particular. And of course, it was really, truly overwhelmingly positive, and we did get good feedback from students about how to expand the experience and how to help them think about moving those skills forward. So we're working on building that into the course. And we're really excited about the possibilities for other courses as well. So again, like this piloting mindset, we're hoping that other folks will be willing to give this a spin in their colleges and units. Speaking of piloting, we also piloted integrating dialogues into our winter orientation for transfer students this past year. And it's just a little sweet orientation. It's so important. You know, it's transfer students. It's a weird in between semesters, right? So we're like, let's try it. And so we built it into that transfer orientation. We got great feedback from students about going deeper with each other. As you all know, that's one of the many outcomes of the dialogic connection. And so we're using that experience and the assessment to write a proposal to build a dialogue into our first year experience orientation. We're going to take that off this fall in just about 6 weeks. We have a special multicultural student orientation that we do. And so we're going to do the same dialogic experience in that multicultural orientation. We call it the kickoff. And then again, our goal is to build that into first year orientation. So those are just some examples. That's been our approach. Start small in just a few courses or programs, get some data because we're at a Research One institution. No one takes us seriously if we don't have research, unfortunately. But in the tradition of essential partners, we spend a lot of time reflecting with that data and thinking about it and continuing to refine our process. Slowly start to scale with our partners, which really helps us get buy-in and investment from the folks that we want to work with. So I mentioned some other initiatives we have. We're currently developing a dialogue series that invites faculty to connect their scholarship with questions of identity, meaning, and belonging. And we're hoping that then encourages them to facilitate conversations among students. One of the most exciting developments has been our work around that dialogic learning, both in terms of curriculum development, syllabi consultation. These are some of the things that we're hoping to bring to our faculty and instructors and say, this is really a value add for our student learning. I'm going to just pause here. So perhaps the most encouraging aspect of this work has been the support that we've newly been receiving from our leadership. And I'm looking at my colleague Joe from the University of Minnesota. We have a new president in our university. It's been about a year or so, maybe a little longer. And our newest president recently shared her strategic plan. And under the student learning imperative, it shared that every student will have a dialogic learning experience before they graduate. This is so exciting. And as I'm sure you know, that created a flurry of energy. And okay, what are we doing? Like, what's happening? What are we? And luckily, because of our experience with essential partners, because of these pilots that we've done to help departments and units imagine what this could look like for them, we've been consulting with a lot of folks, and we've been realizing that there is a lot of energy around scaling these things. So because this is now coming both from kind of grassroots, from students, and from up top, from our senior leadership, dialogue is now being viewed on our campus not as like an extracurricular activity or an add-on or a one-off, but as something that we really need, especially to meet these challenging moments. Our institutional leaders recognize that helping students engage across difference is central to the educational mission of a public research university. So recently, our senior leadership in the Office for Equity and Diversity completed the Essential Partners Facilitator Training. And that really sent a powerful message that dialogue is leadership work, not just student affairs work or classroom work. That visible commitment really opened doors across the institution. It helped me be able to be here today. So if that's something that you're exploring for your institution, really highly recommend that as a really important symbol of the importance of the work. And these investments became especially meaningful this past winter. So as many of you know, to take it kind of personal, Minnesota experienced a period of tremendous uncertainty as our city and our campus responded to increased immigration enforcement activity. It was devastating and traumatizing. Many members of our community were frightened. They still are frightened. They're still processing. Students wondered whether they or their loved ones were safe. Faculty and staff were carrying their own fears while trying to support students through an incredibly and prolonged difficult moment. And I just want to pause here and mention with deep gratitude, Grace and the folks at Essential Partners who reached out to me as a human during this time. Really, truly, it was amazing to me how many folks from EP sent so much care and solidarity our way as we were weathering that time, and we continue to, but it meant so much. Thank you, Grace. So we certainly didn't have solutions, right? But we did have relationships and we had dialogue as a practice. Because we had spent the previous year building a community of facilitators and investing in dialogic practice, we were able to respond quickly. Rather than trying to fix anything, we created spaces where people could come together. So we did a dialogue series truly on the fly. It was like we met on a Thursday and we're like, let's do our first one, in 2 weeks. And we did 3 dialogues. We did ask folks to register, of course, but they were just like whoever in our community needed to be in community. The themes that we did for our dialogue in those moments were resilience, hope, and solidarity. Some of the dialogues filled to capacity, and some only brought together a handful of students. But I no longer measure success by attendance alone, and I'm sure many of you know that. For the students who needed a place to process what they were experiencing, those conversations mattered so much. They reminded people that they were navigating uncertainty. They were not navigating uncertainty by themselves. They gave a visible presence of care and connection in a time when many people feel isolated. Several of our students who attended those dialogues, a dialogue attended all of them, and then asked us if they could become a dialogue facilitator. I think everyone just wanted to show up and meet the moment. Sometimes the most important thing a university can do is simply create a space where people can be together, breathe together, listen to one another, and remember that community still exists. In many ways, that experience affirmed why we're investing in dialogue in the first place. We weren't building these skills for idle circumstances. We were building them for moments like that, like this. And looking ahead, we're thinking intentionally about sustainability. So this fall, we'll begin offering a series of micro workshops that will introduce dialogic skills to faculty, staff, and student leaders who may not be ready for a full facilitator training, but want practical tools that they can immediately apply in the classroom, meetings, advising conversations in student organizations. So it's kind of be like a little preview series. But we're hoping that these workshops will help us broaden awareness while identifying future facilitators. And then this winter, with the support of our EP partners, we're launching what we hope will become a signature experience, an intensive retreat designed to expand our university-wide facilitator community. So we're hoping to bring in folks from our regional campuses for this. It brings together faculty, staff, and student leaders to deepen dialogue practice, skills, and our relationships with each other. So our goal is not to simply train more facilitators. Our goal is to really cultivate a culture, one where curiosity becomes a leadership competency and where disagreement does not automatically become division. If there's one thing that we've learned from our partnership with Essential Partners, it's this: dialogue scales through relationships. Every partnership that we've built between offices, across colleges, with our faculty, people in our student affairs units, our DEI units, between students, administrators, has made the next partnership possible. And we all know in higher ed, culture change does not happen because one program is successful. It happens because people begin to imagine themselves as part of it, as joining. We are still early in our journey. I was reminded of that yesterday. Shout out to Tufts, shout out to Middlebury. You are our exemplars. We're learning, we're adapting, we're making mistakes, but we also see some genuine momentum. And more importantly, we've seen this growing excitement from people across our university who see themselves that they can be part of it. And they want to help build these classrooms, organizations, and communities where people can engage difficult questions without sacrificing their humanity or their relationships. I hope our story offers encouragement to others who are at any stage of this work. You don't have to start with a comprehensive institutional strategy. Sometimes you simply begin by listening to your students. Over time, conversation by conversation, relationship by relationship, we begin creating a culture where dialogue isn't something we do. It's about being a good ancestor and planting seeds and trusting in the future. Thanks. Good morning.
Good morning. So not good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Big thank you to Essential Partners for hosting us all this week. Just over a year ago, I started with Brown's Community Dialogue Project after about a decade in diplomacy and peace building. So as an aside, I appreciate you all hearing me out when I've been in higher ed for all of 5 minutes. But I think we have some lessons to share. Our goal at Brown CDP is primarily to use co-curricular programming to develop students into facilitative leaders with high conflict competence that will serve them at Brown in their careers and beyond, which I know tracks with many of your goals at your home institutions. At CDP, we pilot, measure, and assess a range of dialogic interventions and try to hold ourselves accountable to that goal. Today, I'd like to share a bit about what we've learned from rebuilding a dialogue program in a year where our campus faced extraordinary challenges. I want to start by telling you a bit about our students, since they're at the heart of the work. I started at CDP with a listening tour and learned very quickly that we had some really strong workshop content already. Our work up to that point had been mostly skill development workshops to help students engage across difference. We had strong survey results on skill gains, but had a lot of work to do to build organic student interest and a deeper level of engagement. There was a clear need to build in a systematic student perspective into our work and our role for them, not just as facilitators, but as co-designers. So when I hired student facilitators, I wanted them to be skilled, passionate, and have intellectual humility. I did not require that they already be all in on dialogue and bridging work, because after all, constructive criticism and honest divergence of opinion is one of the goals of our work. And we wanted a program that spoke to a wide range of the community around. We have to do more than just preach to the converted. So we got underway. And in November of 2025, just last fall, we brought in Essential Partners to do the 2-day designing and facilitating reflective structured dialogue training that many of you here have probably taken yourselves. And like any good framework that asks us to engage differently, it produced a huge range of really rich opinions. Some students absolutely loved it. I had one student who said, quote, "After just 2 days, I actually feel like a better person." And you can bet I quote that quite a bit in reports to our funders and things like that. Some found specific parts that really resonated with them, and others gently pushed back or were still left turning over where and how exactly we're going to use the new framework. Memorably for me, one of the biggest questions about RSD came from one of our students who asked, "Isn't reflective structured dialogue kind of a lot of, well, structure?" And sure it is. So we want to think about, when do we most need that structure, right? I think of structures within RSD or any dialogue. It's like a dialogic life vest. They help if you're still learning to swim. In other words, it's a fit for student facilitators or participants new to dialogue. But it also helps when you're on kind of stormy seas, even if you're experienced. When the topic or the relationships are sensitive, and when you want to make it safer to do a hard thing. So we plan to do what we always do: pilot, assess, and iterate. We decided to really double down on a new design and intake process to start using RSD and feeling it out. The semester is coming to an end, and our students were going to be tasked with using winter break to flesh out how they wanted to test RSD on Brown's campus. What conversations on campus were a great fit for it? Where might we use a different format? And where might discussion be a better fit than dialogue? Then December 13th happened. I won't rehash in detail the tragic events of that day that led to the loss of two cherished members of our student body. But as you can imagine, it was a period of great grief and shock for our community. The university mobilized a huge range of resources to support during and in the immediate after. Psychological counseling, faculty-led community listening sessions. There were helplines that students, staff, or faculty could call for confidential support, a surge in staffing of student support counselors, and of course, memorials, religious observances, and counseling, and countless individual acts of mutual support. After the initial response, once all the students returned home for their winter break, we had our facilitators together for a series of calls to show up for them, to really ask, what is it that you need right now? How can we be here for you? And their answer was what they needed was a way to process what they were experiencing. They asked for a space where they could reflect together and share. So they decided that they wanted to go ahead and do their first RSD, and this was going to be the subject. So together with the students, we sat down and wrote a script, put a great deal of care into the design. We got fantastic coaching and support from essential partners. And once we had our script, we started a practice that we've continued since. If our facilitators are part of the intended audience of the dialogue, I run the script for them first, so they get a chance to experience it themselves before going and running it for others. So then they ran the dialogue for each other. It was their first try ever. They reflected together on communities that were sources of strength for them before, during, and after the tragedy. They felt held and supported by RSD structures, limited by them. And they closed by sharing what gift each of them had to share with the Brown community as we started our journey. That was an EP suggestion. Our group came out not fully healed, but very closely linked, seen, and supported. And most importantly, with a new collective chapter to their story that built agency. Dialogue didn't replace the other tools and supports. It complemented them with a structured student-to-student tool that could hold the depth of hard topics while still feeling supported. And then critically, we're a young program, first year of this relaunch, we decided that was actually enough direct work on the crisis for our student facilitator-centered model. That it was enough to ask student dialogue facilitators in particular who were themselves experiencing this. It was for two key reasons. The first is our students aren't therapists and we want to avoid secondary trauma. And the second is the reason that we're doing this work is to build skills. Our goal is that Brown students become great facilitative leaders across difference, not to make them carry what felt like was more appropriate for some of the other resources on campus. Our goal is really developmental first, programmatic second. So we said, for this subject, let's keep this for them. But critically, we arranged workshops on psychological first aid to better understand how communities recover over time. And we learned quite a bit about what the year immediately after a traumatic event can look like, the hills and valleys and how people recover, what people need and when. It helped us realize that in any dialogue we held, this was going to be in the background. This was the context. Students still went to class in that building, walked past the memorial, very personal experiences with them. So for all future dialogues, we ask ourselves, how would someone who is still processing this enter into this dialogue? Are we building a space that can hold and support them? I'll give you a specific example. Not too long ago, we held a series of parallel RSDs on America at 250, specifically for international students. We asked students to reflect on their beliefs and ideas about the United States and how they were affirmed or challenged during their time. But now we also had to be sure we were designing for any potential participant whose answer might touch on gun violence. And we had to prepare our facilitators to build a container that could hold that. So that's the bar that we're using now as we design these conversations, having a trauma-informed approach baked in, especially when they're student facilitated. The dialogue doesn't have to be about a particular hard topic for that topic to become a part of the dialogue. Returning to the idea of the Life Vest, we found RSD structure to be especially helpful when you can't predict how stormy that dialogue is going to get. For our facilitators, all of this gets to a really critical point. How are we supporting them? Earlier, I mentioned the listening tour that I did. Students needing to be out front in this for it to succeed. That can be really impactful. It's also a lot to ask. So it's critical that we think about how do we build them up? How do we pour into them? And how do we measure their growth? And we have to ensure that the challenging task in front of them is developmentally appropriate and supported by professional staff. So what we built was a deeply scaffolded professional development series for our facilitators. It included weekly workshop sessions on things ranging from understanding your own triggers and activations and mindfulness, to support with executive functioning and task management, which we know can take a hit after a traumatic. We did workshops on storytelling and leadership, on understanding and intentionally choosing your style in conflict, on identifying dignity and contempt within a disagreement conversation, even on the basics of mediation. Over the course of the year, our facilitators hosted 40 workshops and dialogic experiences for the Brown community, with students not just facilitating, but co-designing many. And critically, we measured the impacts not only of the programming, but of the facilitator experience. We used a blend of dialogic tools, RSD for big topics, workshops for skill development, and lightly facilitated community events and guest speakers to really support a culture of dialogue. And here's what we found. For workshop participants, we saw measurable gains in targeted skills surveyed immediately after the event. The number of participants who agreed that they could successfully have difficult conversations went from 64% to 92% for participants. Those who agreed that they can select an intentional conflict response depending on the situation from 40% to 78%. This was after about a 90-minute session. After participation in an RSD, 92% agreed that the experience gave them a practical tool, perspective, or opportunity to engage across difference, which is sort of, we call it our star indicator. We try to ask that question after anything we do to assess fit. But for our student facilitators, that's where the results were the deepest and the longest lasting. Our findings demonstrated that leading and designing the work and taking responsibility for it is the most transformative impact. So we followed the students for the full year alongside other student cohorts. So we had a comparison group, some start of year and end of year data. There were 2 data points that made me personally very happy after the year. First is that our facilitators saw major gains compared to baseline on willingness to reserve judgment until they've heard multiple sides, which is great. It's what we hoped for. It's what we expected. It's what we saw. Biggest gain they made was in willingness to share their views even when they expect others to disagree. This was far and away the biggest thing. I think it's so important and reflects what we know about dialogue as practitioners, but is often misunderstood. Listening more doesn't mean sharing less. Step up, step back means we want everybody to have the mic, to have a chance to use it, and then pass it on to the next person. Our work isn't about putting a band-aid on disagreement or making it go away. It's about repairing our relationship with disagreement instead. So while we have a room together full of passionate higher ed dialogue professionals, I want to challenge us all. Because we're in a moment right now where higher education is investing in dialogue. That's fantastic, I'm thrilled about it, and it won't be forever. Mm-hmm. And when the next priority for the sector comes along, I think the durability of this programming will hinge on 2 things. First, the results that we generate and document. And second, the human side. What do people remember from their participation in dialogue? Or to put a finer point on it, what do people remember from their very first dialogic experience? Did it make something new possible? Was it well aligned to the real relational dynamics of the participants? We're largely a room of people who already believe in this work, and you come to believe it through firsthand experiences. We often get just one chance to show people what this can do. A good first experience builds curiosity and drives utilization, and a bad one shapes perspectives of the whole dialogue field, fairly or not. So I want to encourage us, segment your audience. Build for the most open-minded and the first movers, but also build for the skeptics not around them. Some people have an active, simmering hot topic that's ready for an RSD. Some people may need a lighter touch or tool. I'd argue that most don't even realize that dialogue is on the menu or what we mean about it. So intake processes, events to socialize the tools and concepts, and incorporating smaller dialogic moments all help build institutional clarity and readiness for the work and for the bigger steps. For us, the two most important design choices that we've made has been to have a menu of options and to take co-design seriously. Just like your institutions, Brown is investing in dialogue because we care about free expression and student belonging. On a personal level, as someone who's worked on democracy and peace building for a long time, I think our democracy is struggling because we've replaced having relationships with those who are different from us, carrying around stories about them. Dialogue replaces our fiction about the other, real facts and experiences from a live person. And research on meta-perception shows us that we vastly overestimate how harshly we're viewed by those who disagree with us. The only way that perception gap starts to close is if disagreement itself becomes less scary and less rare. And since it turns out that this is a skill we can reliably and reproducibly teach, then it looks like we all have some work to do. Thank you all so much.